All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Don Allen. This is the show all about relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. Got a great show for you today. This one is interesting because this one kind of talks about our philosophy in life and how to apply it to our relationship. So should be a lot of fun, should be thought provoking. And at the end, like I said, I've got some really good ideas that we can do as an exercise to continue to bolster and improve our relationship. Well, what I always say is, what have I done for my relationship today? Now, you should be saying that every day, but today you're definitely doing it with me because we're going to find some really good ways that you and your person can talk and really create not only a better relationship, but to immunize your relationship against drift. So today's show's name is your relationship love-based or something else? Well, one of the things we have to do is define what a love-based relationship is. And what I did was I kind of looked at some philosophy of life that we have not only growing up, but how do we use that wisdom throughout our lives? Because life tends to change on us, right? So we're gonna look at that and have fun with it. Okay. So, a couple thought-provoking questions before we kick off that's related to my title. All right. So, when you look at your relationship today, is it shaped more by loving intention or unintentional habits? We just kind of do what we do, right? Which one is it? Right. Now, again, I don't think it's either or, but we're going to have fun playing with that, right? What if the biggest threat to your relationship isn't conflict? What if it's a quiet drift without that intentional loving? Okay, we're going to talk about how to do that. It's a philosophy of life, not just with your partner. But what I find, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this one today, in the What's in It for Me department, is that when you actually shift over to love based, okay, not just with your relationship, but in general, you find that you're healthier, in my opinion. You're finding that you actually can maybe live longer and with more joy in your life. And that sounds pretty good. And then when you start to put that out to relationships, well, then it's more exponential. Now it's all of that synergy that's going on between you both. Because loving relationships, loving based relationships actually brings it back to you. And then it starts to resonate. It starts to go back and forth, right? Okay. So what if in your belief system, what is guiding your relationship right now, today, right? Is it love? Is it comfort? Or maybe you have a harsh, invisible referee going on there. We're going to talk about what those things look like. And I found some good questions from the mailbag department that I think is really fun for all of us. Remember, when you give me one of these questions, chances are there's a lot of people out there going, boy, I'm glad somebody brought that up. So, I always say this isn't just one of us, and we all want to do this together. That's why we do this show, right? Okay. If somebody watched how you treat your partner, would they learn loving intention, or would they see the four horsemen, right? Which is criticism, defensiveness, contempt, or just ignoring our partner, stonewalling? Interesting question. You have to think about your relationship. Do you not miss a chance to point out when your partner does something wrong? Or do you not miss a chance to point out they're doing well, right? Now, again, one of the things I hope, are thinking about that is ratio. I don't think anybody does this perfect. But again, when you start getting into that 5 negative, kind of thing. In other words, we don't do 5 positives to 1 negative. We start falling into that more negative. Then we're in trouble, right? Okay, so let's kick off to our discussion. And one thing I did was I decided to go back to some of my favorite quotes. And I like to sometimes use the same ones on the air because the repetition is good to help us remember. So there was a person named Scott Peck, and he wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And I say there was. He may still be around. I'll have to look. But what he said in that is love is a feeling, or I'm sorry, love is less of a feeling and more of a decision. Okay, a decision or a willingness to act for someone else's spiritual growth. So, do we do things not because it benefits us necessarily, but because we extend ourselves for that spiritual growth to happen in another person? Now, that's love based to me. That's what that is. So, love isn't just something you feel. Right. And that's a misnomer, because when we fall in love with all the limerence and everything, we might feel all that generated love that goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we think, oh, that's love. I'm in love. And it's a wonderful feeling and it's a good thing. I'm not saying that, feeling love is bad. But when things begin to just get into the relationship part of it, right? I want you to think about setting your compass towards that love-based idea of extending yourself, not to get something back, but to extend yourself for the purposes of making the people you love around you even better and more joyous, right? Okay, but that's a choice. And it's a choice we need to not only be aware of, but to do it over and over again. And I'm going to extend that not only just to people you love, but I want you to look at how you conduct the practice of your life with all people. And I'm going to get into where that comes from in a minute. But when you go to a restaurant, even if the waiter isn't particularly nice to you, even if they're snarky, even if the food is kind of slow coming out, do we assume the best in that person and share how we appreciate them, or do we need to critique them and criticize them and telling them that they're not doing their job like they're supposed to? That's catching them doing it wrong if you're doing that. But to find that, we really extend ourselves. The other thing too is I notice when people talk, they'll talk about, well, I didn't tip them because they didn't do A, B, or C. But when they do exceptional service, do you give them the extra tip? See, my experience is people don't, right? They don't when people go over and above. In Europe, at least in France, one of the things I know is you don't tip people. But if you really, really like the service, you put down a little bit of money, like €1 or something like that. And it just to say, wow, I especially appreciated you. But my sense of it is we go to these places like we own the restaurant and they're our servants. First off, they are not our servants. Second off, they're doing that because they need to make money. And I know when I started out in my life, I got to do waiting tables, and I remember how that was. And I always try to tip people because I remember where I was in that time of my life and I want to return the favor. Okay. So another person I talked about, not just Scott Peck, but I talked about a guy named Urie Bronfenbrenner, and I remember him from my dissertation. And he wrote this paper on the ecology of human development. This was clear back in 1979. Wow, dinosaurs, I bet, roamed the earth back then. But one of the things he said was classic. Okay. Relationships just don't live between two people. They live inside of our systems. Well, what are our systems? Well, real quick, the microsystem is your relationship with your partner. It's you two, the micro. The mesosystem is families, kids, close connections, those types of people. The exosystems is work, stress, social pressure, media. Sometimes meso and exo go back and forth with school systems, that sort of thing. But now the reason I want to focus on today, and I kind of went fast with those, and you can review from my past shows, is the macro system. This is so important today. This is really, really important, and it affects our relationship on a micro level, I think. So that's why I want to share it with you. So a macro system is the cultural beliefs, not only about love, but about commitment, about identity to affiliations of groups. But when you look at a lot of the media today, and this goes, and I don't like to get into media because, again, if it's not relevant 2,000 years ago, or it's not going to be relevant 2,000 years from now, I tend to stay away from it. Not necessary. I'd rather go to classic things that are always true. But with the macro systems, cultural beliefs, Okay, cultural beliefs. So think about how much you're seeing on the news has to do with how people think globally about another group of people. Okay, because when you start getting into that and you add some money to it, now what you're into is it's social change, the ideas. So when you have political parties, what you really notice at the very top of all of that are overarching belief systems, what we think is right, how we should, conduct the practice of our life, not only with us, but how the governments, how social norms and culture should be shaped by a belief system. So people compete for those belief systems. You have to understand that because if we absorb those things, it can get into other systems. Like I always say, if you do not think for yourself, other people are going to think for you. And they not only can do it, but nowadays with the social science behind it, and you aim or you target a certain way of advertising at somebody. If you're passive, you can absorb it. I'd rather have you think about it. One of the big words nowadays is influencers, right? I don't consider myself an influencer. I thought about that because I am on the air, but I think you should make decisions in your own life. So what I want to do is present you good data, good information, way things work that's based on success and science, and let you decide whether you want to pick and choose this stuff. Because I really have a lot of faith in you and your ability to think. So if you can work this and it works for you, all the better. But again, I'm not trying to influence you to think my way. Um, that would be something that somebody else does on television. You can see it there. But again, my big point is is that your beliefs are how you were taught to think and what you give importance to. And that shapes the way of you interacting with others. Let me look at my time. I just want to give a few things for that. There was a poem that I learned a long time ago by Dorothy Law Nolte. And I bet you know it. It's called Children Learn What They Live. And what she says in this poem, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's on the internet, trust me. Children learn what they live. If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If they live in hostility, they learn to fight. If children live in fear, they learn to be anxious. If children live with jealousy, they learn what envy is. I like this one too. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. So we could have grown up in an environment where this is what we've absorbed, and we may be putting it into our primary relationships and the people we love around us, in addition to maybe people outside, like waiters or people at the grocery store, right? But I want to give a few of the other ones. If children live with tolerance, they learn patience. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with praise, they learn appreciation. Point is, that's love based. Do you hear it? I'll do one more here. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. So when we create this love based environment versus the other one, right, the something else, what we can do is we can learn to thrive. Now, the other good news is, let's say you lived in that one kind of world that wasn't so good, the something else. You can change it. And you can, through repetition, really learn to do better, right? So let's say you learned these kind of things. Now, this isn't a poem, but let's say you learned some of these things. Got to look out for number one. Nice guys finish last. Do unto others before they do it to you. Winning is everything. You mess with a bull, you get the horns. Strike first, hold the floor, and don't let others speak. Never let them see weakness. I just kind of threw a bunch of these together, but I'm sure you probably heard them. I don't need anybody. Feelings or weakness. What else do I learn here? A leopard never changes its spots, right? So my big point here is, what do you want your relationship to be? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to say, look, we can do this. As a matter of fact, it's like, you guys out there, if you go and get golf lessons, you go and get lessons on pickleball, you'll learn to do it better. That's what we're going to be doing. And we'll see you after our commercial break. Talk to you then.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds.
Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
So, what we're trying to do now is go to the mailbag. But before we do, remember the theme of our show is that loving intention. Is it love-based or is it something else? So you want to pay attention and listen to this as we go along, because again, I'm wanting you all to kind of have a pebble in your shoe. I want you to, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go back to bed, I want you to think, did I do loving intention today? And what does it look like? And that we're going to do in the fourth episode, which is fourth segment is we're going to have you guys sit down and play with this, talk to each other about it. Okay. So first question from the mailbag. When we argue, I get defensive and sometimes say things I regret. My wife says it feels like I'm attacking her, even when I don't mean to. Afterwards, I calm down, but she doesn't forget what I said. Is this just normal conflict or are we doing damage? Well, first off, you always want to ask that question to your partner. Are we doing damage? Is this not working for us? So I'll give an opinion, but I really want you to take that question back to your person. But if when I get defensive, well, defensive is a horseman, which means 96% of the time, it's probably not going to go well. And when wife says, I feel attacked, well, that's something you want to pay attention to, right? So what is it about what I'm saying that makes you feel attacked? But you notice the tone of my voice. What did it? What happened? Okay. So when you calm down, that's a real warning sign that maybe you're flooded. And remember my other episodes. I just did a show on that a couple of episodes ago. But yeah, so if people are flooded, what do you need to do? You need to settle down and you need to do this so you stop talking. Right. So chances are if you keep talking, that attacking is probably where that's showing up. Is it just normal conflict? Well, like I said, you want to ask your partner about that. But the other side of it is it probably is conflict that will lead to drift and some negative sentiment override and maybe a little bit of absence of trust. So I would not use that. Instead, what I would do is to go to something more love-based. But I like this question because what it does is it invites a conversation with your partner. So I like that one. Okay. So again, well, tell me how you feel attacked. Well, that's something else. It's not love-based. And then the person says, well, I feel attacked because you really had a harsh, I'm making this up, I don't know this couple. You said it in a harsh way. So let me try it again without the harshness, right? How do you do that? When this happens, I feel this. What I could use instead is this. Describe what you need, right, for your partner and do it in a way that invites them to want to help you. Okay. So that's the way I would go with those. And by the way, that's both hands open. That's love-based, right? Wow, because it's okay to complain. You need to communicate with your partner what's going right and what needs to be tweaked. Both of you have to do it. So this very, very, very important that you get into the habit of, doing that. Don't describe your partner, describe what you need. Okay, here goes another one. Lately, I've caught myself feeling irritated at my husband more than anything else. I roll my eyes, make sarcastic comments, and sometimes I don't even feel bad about doing it anymore. I don't like how I'm becoming in this relationship. Is this what normally happens when love fades? Well, in this case, that would fall into the it's something else versus love based category. But remember, and this is so important from the Gottman Institute, a lot of times a complaint or a negativity is a longing that we have that we need to give our partner so that they can come and love us. Okay, so that's love based, but we have to do it in a way that invites the love, but also gives it to them so they feel loved too. So let's look at this one a little bit more. Okay, I'm irritated at my husband. Well, the husband probably did something. So when this happened, honey, it really irritated me. Okay. And I'm sorry because rolling my eyes and doing those kind of things is contempt. And that makes my partner feel that they're defective. So I'm sorry if I roll my eyes and you think I think there's something wrong with you. I shouldn't do that. That's on me. That's a bad one. Okay, antidote for defensiveness, right? And I don't feel bad about it. Well, what you could say is, I find that we've kind of gotten into a rut where I'm getting kind of numb or sensitized to the negativity. And that's the last thing I want for us. We've got to stay at least 5-to-1 positive and get back to that 20-to-1 or 20 minutes to 1 minute positive ratio that we really want. Okay. So when you say, I don't like I'm becoming that in a relationship, hopefully all the viewers out there are hearing drift. I'm drifting away from connection. I'm drifting away from feeling good. I'm drifting away from that good feeling that we have, that we show each other fondness and admiration, right? And that we really know each other and celebrate each other. So this is why, from the mailbag, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to catch yourself. That's what I mean by the pebble in your shoe. Because, if you can catch yourself on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and you have that connection going back and forth. The other thing about that is that, life, and I'm going to talk about this in the third segment, but life happens to us. So one of the things I would wonder about this particular couple is that, maybe life is really getting overwhelming and it's just kind of careening over to the relationship. So that relationship, if that's happening, I would suggest people really talk about how their life is going and what's going on with it. And maybe their life is overbalanced. Kind of look at my episode last week on what is wealth in the major life areas, right? So here, next question from the mailbag. I feel like I'm doing more in the relationship around the house, with the kids, even emotionally. I started keeping track in my head. Honestly, it makes me resentful. How do I stop this without feeling like I'm being taken advantage of? Well, one thing that's something else is we got to be careful with quid pro quo. This is something that we were looking at in the 60s and actually practicing in couples work, where the idea of you help couples say, well, I'm doing this, so I get that, right? What we found is that doesn't work. The research, really suggested that doesn't work. As a matter of fact, what it does is build resentment. And when you're hearing this, I feel like I'm doing more in the relationship and around the house, you hear the negative overriding sentiment. Negative overriding sentiment makes you start noticing the negative and you don't fully process it, so you forget about it. So you want to go back to that positive perspective. And in the positive perspective, what happens is that you just assume positive from your partner. But in this case, one of the problems you're having is that there's not enough communication. So you drift away from the communication, and then that starts happening in your head. The happening in your head is something else. It's not love-based. So you want to bring your vulnerabilities, you want to bring your pain to your partner in a way that they can take it and then hopefully give it back in a loving way, love-based. So that's part of what we're looking at. Let me check my time, see if we got another one here. Let's see. This is a good one. This is from a guy. When we argue, I feel like I have to prove my point and win the conversation. Not that this can't happen the other way, but this happens to be from a fella. When we argue, I feel like I have to prove my point and win the conversation. If I don't, it feels like I'm giving in and it's weakness. My partner says, I don't listen. Is wanting to win really all that bad? Well, one of the things I'll get into is what's your point? What's the goal of this? Now, in a love-based relationship, what your goal is to be more loving, to feel more love, and to generate that loving connection back and forth. Okay, so if that's your goal, this would fall in the something else category, because wanting to win is a way of being, but it's not necessarily love-based. As a matter of fact, part of what happens with that is you never, and I don't usually use always or never, but you never want a relationship where you feel like you've prevailed, but you smushed your partner, because smushing your partner makes them go away feeling defeated and small. Those are horsemen. And that's not very loving to do that, right? Did you hear that? Those things don't sound loving to you, right? So what we want to do then is we want to recognize that as an opportunity for drift and instead use countermeasures. Well, the countermeasures here is, looking at having what I call room on the couch. And what that means is, honey, this is what I think. What do you think? And then they say what you think. And then you say to them, well, what I hear you saying is this. Did I get it right? Oh, okay. Well, hey, thank you for letting me know that. That's a good point. I love it when you give good, insightful information to me. I always welcome what you say. You're amazing. You're so smart. You think in ways that maybe I haven't. And that's such a good way of having two heads are better than one. I appreciate you, dear. All of those are fondness and admiration statements, right? So that would be loving and a loving based thing. You can always get around to solving a problem together. But what you want to do first off is to really understand your partner and they understand you, and then go back and forth with that in a loving way. So that's where I would say, rather than trying to win, that would be my goal. Okay. Check my time, and let's do one more. What the heck? I've started noticing that when my partner brings something up, I immediately explain, defend, or correct them. Also, I notice something negative that my partner is doing. I should change that. Also, if I notice there's something negative that my partner is doing, I have to point it out and tell them a better way. Is this getting in our way? Well, I'm going to say what I said in the earlier one. That's what you want to ask your partner. Does me doing this get in your way? And, it's nice to know something and it's nice to point out things. But if you do it in a way that your partner feels smushed, that's not love-based, right? But if you notice when they say, when my partner brings something up, I immediately, so it's a habit. You remember what I talked to you earlier in the first segment? Where do we learn how to be? What's our operating system, so to speak? So what happens here is, if I have to immediately explain, defend, or correct them, what your partner might experience is what we call condescension, right? You are higher than them and that you're explaining to them. You have to be real careful with that, because many times when you do that, people think you're arrogant. And when you're arrogant, they may start either resenting you or wanting to defend their point of view or defend themselves. So this gets us away from the love-based, right? So one of the things you always want to do with that is not give an opinion that's harsh. You want to say it's gentle, right? So if you do say, well, this is the way I see it, you really want to go back to, but that's just my opinion. How do you see it? And I really want to listen. And then when they say it, make sure back to them, say, well, this is what I heard you say, honey. Did I get it right? Right. And then praise them. Oh, thank you for giving me your point of view too. And that makes them kind of want to hear yours more. And also that it's on the same level. It's all on the same plane. So those things can really, really help, a relationship, because it's love-based. And hopefully you're hearing all of the answers to my questions today with that theme of how do you get it back to love-based? Because we talk about these a lot of times. Sometimes I highlight the horsemen, but this time I really like to highlight the loving intention and get to where that's your compass, that's your barometer. We're going to go ahead and break for our next commercial break, and then we're going to come back and look at ways to really fix this. We'll talk to you soon.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
And okay, we're back. So first thing I want to do is put up my identifying information. If you would like to contact me, if you have any good suggestions for my show, any good topics, if you want to give me a question for the mailbag, I will entertain it and look. And I'm going to say again, chances are, if you're saying it, there's a ton of people out there that are glad you did. So we're putting that up there. I don't leave it up for the whole show, but honestly, you can always stop my show, freeze frame it, and write down the information in that way. So just always like to put that up there for you. Next thing I'd like to do is to put up the relationship house. I'm not going to keep it up for a long time, but I just want to show you back to love-based. You know, the bottom three: turn towards, make plenty of bids to connection. Hi, honey, I'm home. Hey, I'm over here. Come here. I want to see you. So happy to be home for you. Those are turn toward bids. So you need to have a lot of them. The next one is share fondness and admiration. All right. Tell your partner how awesome they are. And I always say fondness, admiration, loyalty, respect, adoration, and reciprocity. So want to do all those. Want to make sure they're there for you. And then build love maps. Make a study of what your partner really likes, right? And not necessarily use humor all the time to connect with them. Sometimes, especially we guys, want to use humor as a way of kind of shielding ourselves from the fact we're being overly affectionate. Don't be affectionate. And furthermore, a lot of y'all, this coming up is Mother's Day. So we want to really make sure we celebrate our moms and grandmoms, and just the amount of work that it takes to be a mom or a grandmom is amazing. So we want to celebrate them. Stepmoms too. Those types of people really dedicate their lives to our betterment and just throw nothing but love-based at us most of the time. So when those kind of relationships are happening, that reciprocity needs to happen, and we need to make sure that they feel loved and celebrated. So this is a good love-based show to talk about moms and traditions of Mother's Day. Managing conflict, we're talking about today. Create shared meaning and life, make life dreams come true. With that, you know, make sure, this is my I need statement for you, make sure you're really making a study of not only love-based, but what isn't love-based, and where did it come from, and how do we get rid of it, and how do we make sure our partner is receiving and giving that, as well as us that are giving and receiving that love-based intention. I gave you some really good sites to look at in terms of what loving relationships feel like. So let's go to our countermeasure section of the show. Okay. So One thing about that is, three common, not love based, but rather something else kind of issues that happen and their replacements. Okay. So, one of the things that can happen in our relationships that cause something else rather than love based is we start to just get along. And what happens with that is the routines, and we can take down the relationship house now. What happens with that is that comfort and routine happens. Now, remember, I mentioned earlier in a past show about limerence and how that feeds on itself. And there's a lot of chemicals that are happening to get us to mate. That's supposed to fade. And when that fades, what we do is we go more to trust and commitment than that limerence feeling. But we can start having that situation where we just get along, where that becomes the goal. And we get into our routines. All of a sudden, we'd rather, I don't know, play golf, or we'd rather do things with our friends, and we'd rather do stuff going on at the gym or in our sport that we just stay away, right? And we like that. Those are nice dopamine hits. Sometimes we just get on our devices and just stay and go and go and go. So what happens is our conflict is low because we're never seeing our partner, but so is those connections. Okay. So what happens now is when that in that relationship house I just showed you, you stop turning towards, you stop making bids towards your partner. And then the bids start to go unnoticed. So even if one comes at you, it just kind of misses. Okay. So those loss of bids create a loss in the emotional bank account. Remember, whenever you do a nice bid, whenever you do something wonderful for your partner, you're actually making a deposit in the relationship house. And when that happens, right, then it makes it easier to, when we have conflict, get out of it and go back to making up and being friends. You start getting weary in that. Well, listen to some of the mailbag questions today, right? Okay. The other thing is really important, and there's actually commercials on television that make fun of this. As we age, the way we understand life, the way we have our values, they all become different and more pronounced. I'm not saying the values don't become different, but the way we interpret them can, right? Add that to the changes in our body and the outside world influences, and we can really drift away from love based. When you talk about, that absorption, I don't know about you, but for me, when I watch a lot of media, and believe me, I don't, it's really easy to absorb the negativity. What I tend to do is to get headlines from a lot of different media platforms. And even the headlines are depressing. Even the things that they're saying seem very negative, or they're laden with a belief system that isn't necessarily what I want to have in my world, right? And again, I'm wondering how I'm getting targeted, who's paying for that, who's making their opinion that pronounced in my life. Okay, so we can bring that toxicity, if you will, into our relationships. So what we want to do is we want to stop and check ourselves. In the Gottman method, what we do is we have this thing weekly called the State of the Union. And what we do is we start out with what's 5 great things that happened this week, and then 5 great things I really saw my partner do that I really appreciated. So we start with all this positivity. But this is where, you can start looking at, kind of how some of these things might be affecting us in a negative way, right? So that's another thing. Just be mindful of what you're bringing in. That's that, system that I talked to you about with Bronfenbrenner earlier, those cultural beliefs, those overarching systems. How is that coming into our world, and do we want them? See, because we are the gatekeeper of that. So make sure that you're mindful, slow that down. Even with a commercial, what are they trying to talk to you about? I did a show on commercials, right? Okay, next one, obligation and role-based living. We're good based. We're good providers. We're good parents. And then all of a sudden, all these roles start to replace the intimacy and the vulnerability in our relationships. Okay, so now we've got a functional partnership. We're doing all the right things in the right way, but we're not starting our day with a 7-second kiss. We're not ending our day with a 7-second kiss. We're not asking our partner what their day was like, not to fix it, but to really care about their experience of it. If something really tough happened in the world, are the people we love coming to us and consoling us and making us feel loved and connected? Very, very, very important, right? So we want to make sure that we keep that fondness and admiration really going in our life. Just very, very important. Okay. So I want to say that too. Um, because relationships don't exist in a vacuum, and because the other systems that Bronfenbrenner is talking about is always around us, it's always swirling around us. We have to make sure that we are, kind of hip to that and making sure that we're not letting it affect our relationships. Okay. And, just think about all that negativity. Sometimes when we look at people who are dietitians and stuff, they say, well, you shouldn't eat so much, let's say, fast food. Okay, well, what does it do if you eat fast food all the time? Well, it's not good for you. What happens? Well, it affects your body. Well, when you start absorbing this negativity, it starts to affect your relationships. And then all of a sudden, here we go. We are into that, hamster wheel kind of effort that we just go and go. The other problem we run into is when we do that and we feel disconnected from our partner, what will begin to happen is that we will start seeking more things that are creature comforts, right? So we may spend more time on the media. We may spend more time having to golf. We may spend more time just exhausted and going to bed and not even saying goodnight to our partner, and just really drifting away from that because we're having to take all that energy for self-soothing in a good relationship. And I don't just mean with, marriage or your favorite person. This is where it's important for our outside people, our buddies, our friends. I'm going to say again, Mother's Day. Really, I'm hoping people gather in community and they really appreciate and enjoy everybody in their love community, and really, take time. You notice something great about somebody that you love, tell them, tell them how grateful you are that they're in your life. Just very important stuff. So we want to look at that, right? So we got to be careful with life stress, kids, schedule, fatigue, health concerns, right? But if we have a good system where we are love based and we continually hone that, chances are a lot of these other things will become our allies, not our adversary, right? So if we have work stress, come home and talk about it and have our partner say, "Oh my gosh, that really sounds awful." And they say, "But I really appreciate you. I really love you. I really am so grateful that you work hard for our family and you work hard for you and I. That really matters to me. And I want you to know that I notice it." That's going to go a long way for mitigating that work stress idea, right? With kids, that's where relationships have to really squirrel away time just for the relationship. Sometimes in our world now, kids, for example, they need more sleep. They need to go to bed at a good time, but they also need to go to bed at a good time because while they're getting all that good sleep, it leaves that time for good relationships. I'll notice one thing that happens commonly with people is they give up their exercise and their body gets fatigued. They need more sleep, right? So how do we make sure that we're getting all of that stuff in? Talk to your partner about it. Talk to, how maybe you can do that in a way that enhances the relationship or enhances the kids at the same time you're doing something exercise wise. Walking a lot is good for you. It doesn't have to be running a marathon. Okay. All right. But this is where, like I said, it's so important that we set that compass for love, that sense of what am I doing? And it's not just with your relationship at home. Like I said, it's everywhere. Be polite. If somebody cuts you off on the interstate, don't go yelling at them. Settle down, because chances are it scared you, and get your bearings again and start thinking of things you're grateful for in the day. And maybe the person who cut you off is having a bad day, or maybe they just had to get to an exit quick. I don't know. But so much of what happens now becomes this idea of, we have to, you mess with the bull, you get the horns. Or if somebody makes you angry, you have to get even with them. Don't do that. Instead, go to this love-based quantity stuff. So what we're going to do when we come back is our fun thing that we do always, which is talking to your partner. You notice I'm really big on that. And the other thing is we're going to have an exercise that you guys can do that really addresses how you two are doing in a love-based way and answer some of those questions from the mailbag in a way that will really work for you. So we'll see you when we get back from our commercial break, and we'll go right into that fun exercise. We'll talk to you then.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Okay, we're back. And now for our fourth segment, we're going to do that fun exercise that I always like to end with. Now, one thing I'll say is safety first. You know your relationship. This is an educational show. It is not psychotherapy. It's just good news that you can have in your life that can really bolster and make a real difference, hopefully, in your relationships, your health, and your longevity. So, the fun exercise for the day. Okay, well, plan a time for you and your person to meet. Well, I always say that, right? Now, your meeting. Sometimes I have you write things down first. This one's more interactive. But what I want you to do is I want you to ask each other this question. Now, when you get answers to these, write them down. Okay? So the first question is, by and large, do you think our relationship is love-based or is it something else? Well, now, I hope you realize that it's not going to be one or the other, I hope, right? I guess if it is, I want it to be all love-based, but I've not seen too many of those relationships. Okay, so by and large, do you think our relationship is love-based or something else? Okay, so what I want you to do is write down which ones you think are love-based, and I want you to write down which ones you think are something else, things that don't work well for you. Okay, so now, what you want to do is to take turns. And what you want to take turns doing is tell each other how you see your relationship is love-based. So maybe somebody writes down, well, one of the things I notice that I always think is love-based is we always eat dinner together and we always say a prayer before dinner and we always thank each other for the food. And you know what? I notice how whenever we do this, whoever's cooking really says, boy, I appreciate you took all this time and care and love in making this food. Thank you. Well, that'd be an example of love-based, wouldn't it? Okay. So you write down a bunch of those. Now what you want to do is write down the ones that are something else, right? So now that you've gotten those down, what you want to do is to kind of take turns going back and forth and talking about, well, this one I think we need to work on. This is not so love-based. Now, if that's happening, right, what you want to do is be careful. Okay, now this is from past episodes, so hopefully you're old hats at this. But don't use the 4 horsemen. Don't say it's not love-based in a way that's criticism, in a way that's defensive, in a way that you're putting down your partner and saying they're defective, contempt, or you're just saying, I don't even want to do this exercise. Heck with it, and just walk off. That would be stonewalling. Instead, what you want to do is you want to give an input Like, well, honey, when this happens, I don't think it's very love-based because it makes me feel this. And what I really wish would happen is this. Okay. So now you're using our magic formula, aren't you? Okay. So now what your partner wants to do is write that down. Okay. Write it down. Don't respond to it just yet. See, and then you go to the next person. Well, honey, when this happens, yeah, I don't know that this is real love based either. I don't think it's intentional, but I don't think it's love based because it makes me feel this. What I wish would happen is that. So just go back and forth and write down whatever it is that you don't feel is love based. Now, some of them might be you didn't take out the trash like I wanted you to, but some of them might be a little more what I called earlier systematic. Like, honey, whenever you come home, I notice that I really feel like you snap at me sometimes. And I could be wrong, but it makes me think that you did, and it makes me feel put down or criticized. And I don't think you're intending that, but that doesn't feel really love based. What I'd like instead is for us to tighten that up a little bit so it does feel love based. Oh, honey, thanks for letting me know that. Let me write that down. Okay, so now you've gone back and forth with complaints and gentle startup, right? And then what you can do is you can start to pick some of these this week and say, all right, let's work on these. Let's pick a couple. And then the other thing, and I don't normally have people do this, but I think in this case with our exercise, it's important. That good observation, let me write this down, take turns. Then what you want to do is you want to turn the non-love-based ones into love-based ones. So let's say something happened, where, hey, when you came home, you were really snarky and you just walked right past me and you just, went to change clothes and you barely said anything. And when that happened, it made me feel like I wasn't noticed. And what I really wish you would do is to maybe when you come home, slow that down. And rather than go right back to the bedroom to change clothes, we have a little ritual where we connect with each other and say hi. Okay, that'd be great. So now during the week, partner comes home and they said, hey, honey, how was your day? Oh, I missed you. Give a couple things that's really wonderful. Boy, you look really great today. Boy, I love just seeing your eyes when I come in the door. And I can't imagine wanting to see anybody else's eyes but yours when I come home. And oh my gosh, I just thank God or the lucky stars that I have that I get to come home to you. And the partner goes, wow, that was much better. Did you see me notice that was one of the ones you said that you wanted to do better? I did. And I'm so happy you did this. And let me do one for you. So now what you're doing is you're noticing. And I don't usually like to have people say, did you notice I did this? But in this case, because it's an exercise, I want you to do that. Now, the other reason I want you to do it is because it's intentional. Because what you're doing is you're walking in the door and saying, hey, today I need to be upbeat and uplifting, and I want to show my partner a lot of love. I want you to start getting in the habit of that. Back to, guys and gals, when we go to the gym or we go play paddleball or we go golfing or whatever it is we do, sometimes we take lessons and it helps us improve our game. Well, we're doing the same thing right now with this. So what I want you to do is I want you to not only improve your game, but I want you both to notice each other. Notice how that starts to build that emotional connection. I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. Thank you so much for joining me. Send me feedback, and we'll see you next week, 1:00 Eastern Time on Wednesday. Take care and have a good week.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.